Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here with
Hey,
Jonathan from Scanline City. Going, man?
it's going good. How are you doing?
Excellent. I wanted to do I don't know, a hangout, a podcast, a live discussion, and I want to show off these awesome cases that you designed. So I'll be switching back and forth between this view and then just the direct camera view. And for anybody with an eagle eye, yes, that is my BVM D32 that I'm using to hold up the white box because there's literally no other surface in my entire apartment that I could wheel over here. So kind of embarrassing that I'm using like one of the best CRTs ever made as a table, but whatever.
I think that's awesome.
So basically, on the simple side, to oversimplify it, what you're doing is unique custom cases for arcade board. But the effort and detail that you put into these is much better than some of just the generic plexi cases I've seen. And not to shit on those. That's not I'm not trying to say those are bad. I'm just saying there's a difference between getting it done and spending the time on some extra quality. And so here is the inside Mortal Kombat case, and a lot of detail here. So, how did you get into doing this? What is this? I'll show different shots of it as we talk. But basically, how
Yeah.
did you get into doing this? How did you accomplish this? You know, give us the story.
Well, I mean, I started collecting arcade boards maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And then, I was like, man, what do I do with these? And I'm a lot like everybody else, you just put them in a box or something. And I'm like, I cannot believe that I spent however many hundreds of dollars or something on these arcade boards that mean a lot to me because I grew up playing, Mortal Kombat, and it's just a lot of memories. And I mean, just putting them in boxes was just kind of sad. So then I found a couple of the other vendors that are still out there that were making cases for them, primarily plexi. And I actually ended up spending a lot of money getting all of those cases for all of my boards, including a lot of the ones that they have. I gave them the measurements for and whatnot. But whenever I got them, I just, I, well, for one, there's two things. One, either they were kind of overdone to the point where I couldn't see the original boards like you can see now, because that's a big part of that nostalgia factor. You want to be able to look at it while you're playing it and say, "Wow, that is an original Mortal Kombat board." And then the other thing was they, with that plexi, especially the thinner plexi, always just felt a little flimsy. Like when you grabbed it, when you pinched it off the shelf or something like that, it always just felt like it was going to crack. Not to mention that the boards, they only had a few mounting points. So the boards would bow and all that stuff. It just kind of drove me nuts for something that you usually would pay, quite a lot of money for. So that's why eventually I set out and said, well, we're going to get, a laser cutting machine, CNC machine, printing. And I know that, so, printing doesn't apply to this, but I wanted something where I could make it out of steel. So this is 18 gauge steel with a cast plexi cover over the top so that you can, don't have to worry about fingerprints, or you can clean it. You don't have to get it scratched. Not to mention, if you did end up scratching something, you could just replace the plexi and that'd be way cheaper. And then the other thing, obviously, is that I wanted it to be really, cool looking, and try to preserve the feeling of the game. That's why you have the original Mortal Kombat logos on these, and that's going to be ongoing for, say, the Konami games and everything like that. But again, I whether it's pretty much anything that I like playing, while you're playing it, you want to be able to look at it, whether it's an original Sega Genesis or whatever. But in this case, I want you to be able to look at it, feel that big sense of nostalgia and happiness to be like, yes, I have an original Mortal Kombat board, and that is it. That is the feeling that you're getting from this, and it's protected, obviously.
Yeah, that is absolutely awesome, and it's certainly you've certainly accomplished that. And in fact, this is pretty decent proof because I took this to a live event in a duffel bag. Now I wrapped them all in bubble wrap, of course, and the only thing that happened was that there was a little bit. Now the could kind of sort of see where the plexi came up a little bit from the metal. So I'm just gonna
Mm-hmm.
unscrew the screws, release the tension, and screw them down. But I mean, if you really think
Mm-hmm.
about what that means, right? So I wrapped these in plexi, I put them in a duffel bag, jumped in an Uber, jumped on a subway, did an entire evening's live event, put them back in a
Yep.
duffel bag, and the only thing that happened is that you've already got to step up against a lot of the other other cases
Oh,
that
big time.
yeah.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You were talking about knocking stuff over. So I was doing some shots in here of these PCB cases, and I'm just a huge like bull in a china shop. Just oh my gosh. So it was this board actually was sitting on like a small little tower thing to shoot, and I accidentally bumped into it, and it fell off. And I'm talking like from head height, hit the floor, rolled across it. And the couple of guys that were with me were like, well, this is our chance to find out how durable these cases are. Plugged it in, worked just fine. I'm like, all right, that's the one and only crash test we are ever going to do with these boards.
That's funny.
But yeah, I mean, it's a little freaked out at the time, but again, yeah, and I don't know. I mean, there is another factor to this too that and it's kind of too bad because these boards just get so expensive now for people to buy. But I really hope that there is at least some sense that by making these kind of PCB board covers that it is helping preserve these boards, which I'm a big supporter of. And I also hope it, inspires people to, potentially go out and maybe it's just one board. Maybe you just loved Simpsons as a kid, and that's the one board that you want. And if that's the one board that you're going to get, you may as well make it as cool and protected as you possibly can,
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
what I hope to do is, if I can make these and have people buy more of these boards and take care of them, I feel like it's a big win.
Yeah, I completely and totally agree. And I think I think that's actually I think you nailed it right there. I think with Mr. And some amazing creators porting over cores that are absolutely accurate enough to even hold game
Oh yeah.
tournaments on, I do think we're at a point where people are kind of, you would think it's taking away from original hardware, but I think it's really adding to it. I think people are using
I would
Mister
agree with
and
you.
Raspberry Pi for things like, okay, well, here's, I'm going to use all of the, or use this to play all the games that I really like a lot. But I now that I have a choice of different good ways to play, I want to have the best possible option for my favorite games.
Yep.
Maybe I'll sell off my boards that I don't love that need some TLC, but I'm going to put some time and some money into my favorites, and that way I could always have it.
Yep.
So
Well, and it's, I'm glad you brought that up. And this has been something that has been, on my mind for a while now because, I got two Misters and I love them and I have them in an arcade machine, and I especially love them for holding some arcade games that are just ridiculously expensive. Like Dodonpachi is just like,
yeah,
any of those cave games, right? It's like I'm not spending like that much money I wish I could, but that's just crazy, right? But for the games that I can get, it just I don't care if it's exactly accurate, like I would never notice, and I probably won't because it's so good now, even emulation, right? But when I don't even if I'm playing on an arcade stick, when it's sitting on the shelf next to the monitor and I'm playing, no matter what, it doesn't give me quite the same feeling as when I can see the original arcade board hooked up.
I completely agree.
And
As silly as that might sound to
and
some
can't
people.
argue you can't argue. I mean, you really can't argue with that in at least in my opinion. It's just not quite the same thing. And you're right. It's so good now. It's not really an argument of, oh, well, the Mister and everything is 1-to-1. I'm like, yeah, that's great, and I love it for that. Uh, but there's just something not the same. It's the same reason I still end up playing on my original Genesis versus say the analog system. It's and that's great too. But it's at the same time, I guess it's whatever gives you that nostalgic feeling. If playing on the Mister is enough, that's great. But to me, I wanted to make these boards for the guys and girls out there that this is the pinnacle.
Yeah,
Of playing. Yeah.
completely agreed. And is this the plan going forward that you're going to combine thin plexi with sheet metal?
Yeah, that's it's originally I was just going to say, well, It's stainless steel. We're not going to do plexi over the top of it. But then I was like, man, I don't know if people are going to be upset about fingerprints and you're going to have to clean it all the time
Yeah.
because we all know how stainless steel is and you can scratch it easy. Now, obviously, this isn't something like an arcade stick or something where you're putting your hands on it all the time. But that's why I said, you know what, we're going to just get good quality plexi. And in fact, the final release, actually, I think, and we're going to test it, may have a little bit thicker plexi, so it will stay down on the steel a little better.
I don't really think that's
Uh,
necessary. You might want to, check look in the chat because now it's. I mean, there's no bowing in and out really like there was
right,
before,
right.
and I think, and I also think that the look, especially with like the lettering here and the logo,
Hmm.
looking through plexi onto the metal just gives it a very very cool effect. But even like you were
Oh
saying with
yeah,
fingerprints, right? Like even if that
yeah,
fingerprint did stick, gone. So it's a
yeah.
lot harder with
Exactly,
metal.
exactly. And so I think just giving people the option. Look, you want to take the plexi off? Go for it. Or maybe you want to put it on when you're going to, like you said, an event or something like that. Go for it. So I personally really like the plexi on the steel because I do think it gives it a little extra dimension. And then around those cutouts, especially where it's so fine, like around the dragon tongue and everything like that, it kind of gives an extra highlight around
Mhm.
it. So especially if anybody who's going to like Instagram, a picture of it, it does, add a little extra contrast to the board and everything like that. So but yeah, that is going to be the plan going forward. And there will always be, some kind of cutout, like you see on all these boards have, different logo cutouts. And I'm super excited for so many, like, like RoboCop and, a lot of those one-offs. And that's another thing. It's like, I think that a lot of people that have done these boards in the past, they're going to do CPS 1, CPS 2,
Mhm.
you know, they haven't really done the Mortal Kombats, but I could see that, and then that's it. And to me, and maybe it's just because I just want to do it, I want to do a lot of those other boards that people have that are really rare, and maybe it's made to order, and maybe it takes a little bit longer, but again, I want this, the Titan STV,
Yeah.
obviously the Neo Geo. There's so many, boards out there that I think would be super, super cool.
So let's go over the details of this case, and of course, some of them are going to be the same on all of them, but this is MK1, so we're starting with it. Anybody that's ever used Mortal Kombat arcade boards knows that there's usually a potentiometer for the volume that comes with it. Now, because I'm me, because I did that video a couple
Hmm.
months ago, or maybe it was last year, even now with Steve from HD Retrovision, but I ended up calculating the exact voltage to make this line level audio. So instead of a potentiometer, I just have this little clip, the resistor in it to set this to line level output. And that's for people who just want to use a super gun and nothing else. So if you're just using the JAMA connector here to connect with a super gun and nothing else, you're never going to actually put it into an arcade machine that needs volume control, then that's what I used it for. But if you do have it in an arcade machine, then that's when you use this piece right up here, which will have. I'm sure you're probably going to offer potentiometers with it, so it comes with
Yeah.
that plastic brace that you 3D printed along with it, right?
Yep. Yep. Comes with that.
So
And if you do have, one if you do have or like an original arcade machine, or a lot of times if you bought the PCB board, it came with that, and likely it would fit in there.
cool. Yeah, the one I have is
Yeah.
old and beat up, and it definitely wasn't the original, so I kept the potentiometer anyway. The
Yeah.
other thing that I was kind of interested in is, let me see if I can get the perfect shot for this. Oh, I guess I'll skip to this side. So you have rubber feet on the bottom, for
Hmm.
people that want to sit it. Uh, yeah, all right, you can see it next to your logo here. For people that just want to sit it flat, which I know a lot of people don't like to sit their arcade boards flat like this because then you potentially get some bowing in the arcade board over
Hmm.
the years. However, when you're running tournaments or even when you're just playing in your house, sometimes having your super gun connected here on the side and just leaving it flat is the only way to do it. So I'm glad that you added the rubber bumpers, but it could also be put on its side, which I often do. I often either put it on its side or just like this with the super gun, just kind of hanging off the
Yep.
top, just sticking right up
Well,
here.
and I will mention this design now for the final release will be the logo will be flipped so that you can have it just standing vertically like that. And then that Mortal Kombat logo is going to be flipped. So you could put your super gun or maybe your JAMA extender on the top and play it just like that.
So it says
You know,
Mortal
because
Kombat up right side up, and you still have your super gun
yep,
sitting on the top.
yep, exactly, exactly. And one thing that is unique about this too, compared to any of the other ones, is we did add in every one of the JAMA boards, we do find a place on the PCB underneath that doesn't have a lot of traces or anything like that, or that's blank, and add a support in the middle, sometimes more than one, for exactly the reason of not of keeping that board exactly level. You know, and every one of those are 3D printed to be exactly level. So I think that that is going to help even if you are playing or even storing it um,
So
horizontally.
that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. Now, when you're designing something like this, you have to account for board revisions or just completely
Yep.
different boards because that's how arcade machines worked. It wasn't like they had to adhere to a Super Nintendo case where everything was down to the millimeter. You could just bolt anything to the inside. So if I were
Yep.
making this for myself, what meaning one case only, not in mass production, I would try really hard to make, to get these as close as possible, to try to make it as thin as possible. So maybe even remove this heat sink and make this the metal case the heat sink and basically cut like a full inch out of the width. But you have to
Right.
compensate for board revision and different size heat sinks. And unless you really want to get into the business of supplying brand new heat sinks with each one, see if I can get it in this
Right.
view, kind of see it behind the connectors here, but like you kind of have to compensate for that. So was this basically just kind of a guess in, let's see too on the inside. Yeah, all right, in that view, you kind of see a standoff that goes to nothing. That's just a piece of
Mm-hmm.
plastic that kind of supports the bottom of the board without bowing to prevent that from settling. So it's still not probably the best to leave it like this, but you don't have to worry for short term. So I guess the
Yeah.
long-winded question that basically is, how did you determine the exact thickness you wanted to make these, and where to stop yourself between let's make it as thin as possible versus as compatible as possible?
Yeah. That. Well, I mean, I my thing was I have a feeling that a lot of people were going to want to keep their heat sinks on there, or and I looked at a couple different people's boards, asked a couple people who had it in terms of the height, and as far as I know, everything has been, we've given a little bit of a grace, a buffer right there for everything, for regardless of whatever board revision that you have, at least that I know of. And usually I'm going to get like 5, 6, 7 different, you know, people who have the board and to say, it's this height. But yeah, that heat sink is a little annoying, mainly because they use that cheap plastic, whatever, standoff to hold that heat sink up. You can kind of see
Yeah,
it sticking out. And unfortunately, and that's something, honestly, at least on my boards, I just clip the top of it because it's really just for the, holding it up.
mm.
So I just clipped the top of it. But yeah, I just kind of did some research and gave it a little bit of extra room just in case. And I mean, it helps it breathe, I guess, at that point too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with the sides open, you don't really have to worry too much about that. And
Right.
and I guess for people that really somehow wanted to make it as slim as possible, you could always just buy your own standoffs and kind
Oh
of
yeah, you
kind of
totally
do stuff
could.
like that. So the JAMA connector right here. Um, one of the things that I had a really big problem with one of the plexi cases I cut is when I tried to slide the HAS onto it. This bottom piece was in the way, so you couldn't actually insert the HAS or some other super guns as well. And I've seen other cases solve this by having like 3 inches worth of gap on the bottom, which is just
Yeah.
beyond annoying. I can't believe people thought that was a correct solution for it. And on yours, with just the Hass as is, it plugs directly in. With some annoying rubber feet I put on it, it kind of hits, but it was just rubber feet. It wasn't anything else. So you obviously took that into consideration. But have you
Yep.
also thought of doing a tapered edge here, or some for just to kind of go through all of the, to have all of those scenarios
Right.
covered?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I only have the Hass, and then I tried a bunch of different, JAMA extension harnesses and stuff like that, and made sure that accommodated. But yeah, I have thought about that. I'd love to just get a hold of some of those because, like you said, I want to cut back as little as possible, um, but still accommodating all the different super guns. I mean, obviously, whatever super gun you have, you could use a JAMA harness and be good to go because every single one I've tried, fits perfectly.
All right, so I'm gonna grab MK2. So here's the full case. Similar in that you have the awesome logo, you get your vent, but here is, let me try to find the best. So what you have on the bottom is the main PCB. You have these very strange connectors that were warped even when I got them, that connect
Hmm.
to a secondary board, and then the audio board, similar to MK1, is yet another board. So this one has three that you needed to integrate into this. So, yeah, I'll make that a little brighter for everybody. So that's kind of nuts that all three of these had to be all into one board like this. And same thing as before. Not only did you have to work them all in, but you had to compensate for differences, model revision, stuff like that. Yeah,
Right.
light over here too. So was this just basically like when you're trying to move a bunch of stuff in a van? Sometimes you got to take it out, put it back in a bunch of times. Like so,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
you basically just trialed and errored this until you found good mounting
Oh,
locations and stuff.
I mean, there were so many different revisions where you put it together and you're like, oh man, this is going great. This looks fantastic. Then you go to try to put one of the cables in, and you're like, oh, well, that's not going to work. I have to start all over because there's so many different things to account there in terms of making it all fit or even just getting it to be stable. That because that's obviously a huge priority for me. But then obviously this is a good example because you have this revision and then you have the other Mortal Kombat revision, which is just two layers. And I really wanted to get it to the point where it's the same exact design, but will accommodate both boards, and that's what we now have.
Awesome.
So you can get this case for both revisions, and they are different, obviously. But yeah, that was a big part of it, and I think that yeah, trying to cut no corners makes designing these a huge pain in the butt sometimes.
What makes it kind of even more challenging, get that way. So the board comes just past the halfway mark here, and this
Hmm.
board doesn't fit anywhere around it. So it's not like you could have
Yeah.
them on the same, on the same level just next to each other. Your only choice was to make this case a heck of a lot wider or a little bit thicker. I think you made the right
Hmm.
call doing it this way.
Yeah, and it does make it, tough because a lot of these boards, so many of them, were not meant to, be connected like this. It was meant to go in an arcade machine. So many things like that second layer, there is no support, uh, like what's closest to us on that second level. So you have to have some kind of drop down from the top to hold up that second level, which is a huge problem with this board because that those connectors on the back side there just are so flimsy, which is another reason why I like, putting it in this case because once you have it connected right, like it's going to keep it there, which is a big problem. It's just a really strange connectors that they used on these, but kind of what like in the chat too. It's like my mentality on a lot of these arcade boards is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like if it's running good, just keep it running.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
until
funny
you
too.
need to
These
do
are
something.
so fragile that when I got this board back, played it for a while, and this is one of the few times I actually got a chance to play this because with so little space in my apartment and without a case, I had to I had to take one table, clean it completely off, put cardboard down, spread these boards out to use it, wheel a monitor over, and then like have my arcade stick on my lap. Like there was no way to safely play this without a case. So I
Mm-mm.
was able to finally play it. Worked perfect. Got it to the event. It did not work at all. It kept giving me ROM errors. I got
Yep.
home and it worked perfectly when I tried it again at home. So
Yep.
it's just something you're gonna have to deal with. Everybody's
Yeah.
gonna have to deal with. I had the MK4 board, which was going a bit. Jose fixed it for me. I got it back, same thing, and I crossed my fingers. I had kind of like a gut feeling, and I just hit the whole thing with a hot air gun, just very lightly, just kind of making strokes across, and let it sit,
Hmm.
and then tried it again, and it's been perfect ever since. So could have been a
Yep.
trace, could have been anything, but these things
Who
are really
knows?
fragile, and having cases like this really do help.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
this
Because
for
once you get it
anybody seeing
going,
this
yeah.
right here, there's not much pressure between wires here. It looks worse than it is in the picture I'm seeing. There's enough space so that these wires aren't being hurt or pinched right here, and that's the necessary power cable that goes from the soundboard to the main board. That's the control cable. Well, see if I could flip it over and get any
Yeah.
other views here. The only other view I haven't
And
shown is front.
all of those different standoffs, you'll kind of notice that a lot of them, like something like all these different standoffs have a lot of little custom things. Like that middle one we're looking at right there has a little slot that's actually holding up the board as well. It's holding up that first board. It has a little slot that's holding up, which is really nice. And then, like we were seeing on those wires, it has a little notch so that those wires aren't getting a lot of pressure. And that was another thing on a lot of those other, boards. They'll just put a straight tube in there and call it good. Like they didn't ever connect to the wire to see that wow, there's a lot of pressure. So that's another thing we kind of went the extra length on, and at least to me, and I know that the JAMA connectors are probably just fine. But if you're an OCD guy like me, you can see right there. If you didn't have that notch holding up the JAMA connector right there, you're losing a lot of strength. Like especially if you're connecting your super gun directly to it, like the Has on this board now, because of that support in the middle, it's strong. I mean, you're not gonna bend that JAMA connector at that point.
Yeah,
And at least for me, I think that's really important.
better shot of it. There we go.
Yeah, there you can see the notch into it. Yep.
Yeah, very cool. So the only thing I'm not sure if it's coming out. When you'd ship me these, there's some streaks on the metal from the blue painter's
Yeah.
tape. So I don't want anybody to think that that's what they're going to end up with. That's not like an
Yeah.
age problem. This is remember these are prototypes. So any
Yeah.
weird issues like that. I tried
Yeah.
scrubbing it off and it wouldn't come off. So I guess it's just use plastic. The industrial shipping style plastic wrap instead of painter's tape next time. But
Oh yeah. Yep. I already got that actually right next to me. So that's gonna end up going on all the different sheets when they get shipped out.
sorry, I'm just trying to get a better shot of this, but it's not really working out with the lighting. So I will put it on its side then. Use the kick harness that keeps falling out. For anybody that's kind of unfamiliar with arcade boards and how they connect, um, your average arcade board is wired for 3 buttons. Well, three, start, coin, all of the directions, and then
Yep.
3 buttons. And then some can go up to four, like Neo Geo. Sometimes later on in the 2000s, you'll see 6 buttons through the JAMA connector. But generally speaking, anything more than 3 buttons had its own harness. And when you're using it with super guns, you have to make a custom harness that goes from the connector on the motherboard here. Um, that was a custom one I had for an arcade machine, and then I cut it up and used it, spliced it for the terrible splice job I did there. But that's how I get it into the Hass and the other super guns that I is simply by having that wiring harness. So that's something that you'll see hanging off the side of almost all of these boards. And the only time you wouldn't is if it was a full consolidation. So, like we talked about before, if there was a piece of metal here with all of the connectors on it, this would be sitting in the back, plugged in. And hopefully, we'll see that within a year. The only other thing I think would work for UMK3 is this capacitor and this heat sink I think if you're using the wolf boards like these, which are, it was a nickname to describe one board that could be used with, I think it was NBA Hang Time and UMK3
Yep.
and a couple of others. I might
Yeah,
consider, yeah,
Rampage. Yeah.
exactly. I might consider having new heat sinks, and that's a brand new capacitor I put on anyway. And you might be able to
Mhm.
drop the height of this case by half.
Yeah, that's true.
This doesn't really get that hot because, remember too, these were meant to be in sealed arcade machines and all that stuff. Let me try a different
Right.
angle here just to see.
And I mean, maybe that's something that we could offer where it's like, oh, well, if you do want to replace, that heat sink to something smaller, then we just simply offer, shorter standoffs, just a little, hardware kit. And there you go. You can drop that board down.
I think you
You
just
know,
nailed it. I think that's the solution right there.
yeah,
You
yeah.
sell it with these standoffs, maybe even add 2 or 3 millimeters just in case, just so that you're really covered for
Yeah.
everything, and then sell it with
Yep.
standoffs that are only about this high, and
Yep.
then just tell people here's the exact capacitor, here's just the size, shape, and capacitance and all that. Here's the type of
Right.
heatsink you need. Buy your own, and then you'd be able to just
Yeah.
because adding these to the uh, in a bag labeled, shorter standoffs for custom use
Yeah.
only. That would add what,
Yeah.
$3 or $4 cost to the whole thing.
Oh, Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Even if even if you maybe planned on doing it in the future, it would be super cheap just to have that. And I do plan on hoping, if somebody can say, "Oh, this is a great heatsink for it, etc." I'd love to do, just a how-to video like here's how you install a heatsink, and if you want to use the shorter standoffs, here's how you do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess some people might argue I want the nostalgic look of the heatsink it came with, but that's
Right.
not me at all. I have a lot of
Yeah.
respect for nostalgia, but it's I think this is one of these things where if you get a different, I think this is a voltage regulator, so if you get a different one on here, a modern one, you get a newer heatsink. And you're able to drop it
Yep.
down. I think that would be pretty cool. The only other advantage, though, is when you're and once again prototype, it'll be right side up when these things go to
Yeah.
market. But let me get another top shot here. So when you're using these things, the other advantage of it being wider is that if you have your super gun propped up here, or if you have the built-in case and you want it facing this way,
Yep.
I mean, I'm not being gentle with this thing, and that's not falling over. Where if it was much thinner,
Yeah.
it totally would. And same
Yeah.
with this, right? If you have it, you decide you want it this way. Now you're top heavy. That's still not bad at all. And in fact, with if
Yeah.
you were able to you could probably make universal braces that just slide onto the thickness of your material,
That's
right?
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are thinking about that. I also really want to support the people that, you know, uh, I want to make it so that, if you have, like I got like an original MK1 arcade machine, and I do plan on taking mine and mounting it inside of the cab. So I wanted to not only get some little brackets to make them stable on a table, but a universal one that kind of allows you to place any of our board covers onto the side of a cab.
Mm.
I think that would be, again, just like a universal bracket that you could buy that would just clamp on, any of our boards would be kind of cool
I
for people who
absolutely
want to
love
put on
that idea
cabs.
because I have to wait till I've moved into the new place and see how everything goes. But in a perfect world, I
Yeah.
actually would have a Mortal Kombat 1 machine, and I'd love to be
Hmm.
able to swap these out in an easy way. So have it, instead of having these
Right.
boards bolted to the side, having your bracket bolted to the side and being able to drop
Yep.
these in to swap out between the two or the four.
Yeah, and honestly, if you had a whole super gun setup, you take that bracket and you could put it on a wall if you wanted to, and then you could, boom, attach it onto the wall or wherever you're doing it. So we're actually working on that right now, especially, and it should be pretty easy, or it will be pretty easy because every one of our boards are going to have the same thickness steel and plexi.
Awesome.
So it'll just kind of like cinch onto that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So that way it could just clip on and grab it, and because it's metal, you
Yep.
don't have to worry so much about like do it carefully here, but like that's not going to bend and break your metal right
No.
there at all.
Yeah. No.
especially with the standoffs and everything holding it rigid like that.
Yeah. You'd have to really crank on it to do something to it.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, even if it was just slightly angled, so imagine the
Hmm.
bracket grabbing it, but you're still kind of tilted a little bit backwards, then you're just talking
Yep.
about downward pressure. Unless somebody was pulling
Yeah.
on the side or anything like that, you wouldn't really have
Right.
anything to
Right.
worry about. Set it like this without the kick harness falling out. So yeah, that is very cool. I love how the logos are all built in and everything.
Oh yeah, and really, you can only get that that really really fine detail that you're seeing, like that little star um, next to the dragon. It's like a really really fine cut. You can only really get that on a laser. Um, but to me, that's those kind of details. That's what makes it really cool.
And these cuts are done with the laser itself, right? That's not paint or anything.
Yes. Nope. Everything you see here is that's engraving with the laser, and all the cuts are done with the laser. Yep. Everything.
That's awesome.
You know, I have thought, maybe down the road, I think it'd be kind of cool to do something with wood. Um, if especially, for certain like themed games would be cool. Like Sunset Riders would be cool for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Um, yeah. So, and that would be on a CNC machine. But yeah, lots of cool things planning on the future.
Definitely. All right, let me grab the fourth one. As I'm picking these things up, I'm also realizing that with the plexi on the outside, I'm not getting any sharp burrs in the metal. Whereas if it was a metal case that wasn't fully rounded, it could be easy to cut
Yeah, that's
yourself.
true.
So that's actually another bonus I didn't even realize. So here's the sad, lonely stepchild of the Mortal Kombat
But
universe here. Didn't get much love.
that four looks cool. The logo looks
It
cool.
certainly does.
You know.
I don't hate this game. It's hard to talk about it when you could also play UMK3, MK2, and
Yeah,
MK1. But
yeah, it's true.
yep, and same
It,
thing with this board. Very, very sturdy. I'm knocking on it pretty hard, even in vertical. So
and this is a smaller board too, so it's super sturdy.
much smaller
This
board.
thing,
I'll get
yeah.
down here and I'll get. Well, at least you know what kind of caps are in this.
Yep. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, so there's definitely some space with this heatsink. So same thing. I think a very cool thing would be to offer separate kits for a few bucks that have the shorter standoffs. So that way you don't have to deal with heat sinks and capacitors and stuff like
Yep.
that. If people want to mess with it themselves on their own time, it's another heat sink right
Yep.
there. They'd be able to edit that out or to to change it and then lower this down. But I think a lot
Hmm.
of people might really want to keep it a little thicker for all the reasons that I was just poking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. At least from me, I like keeping them. Well, we're making more and more of these boards, right? But eventually, I'll have all the boards with these metal covers. But it'd be nice to kind of have a shelf that you can just kind of sit them all up on. Uh, and if they're thicker, it's just going to be a little bit easier for them to all stand up.
Good
Yeah.
angles to show that there's certainly room to mess with this thing, but same thing. I think that all of these would look amazing with the choice of a custom built-in super gun.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that would be a really cool thing to do. I'm also interested in, I mean, I guess obviously you can do it custom, but I mean, more important on the MK1 and MK2 is just shorter, all those wires connecting the soundboard to the main board and all that stuff are just so long.
Yeah,
And so you're having to tuck them everywhere. I mean, obviously you can splice them and stuff, but I just wish there was an easier way to just buy a really, you know, the exact right height cable. It would be nice for us to sell
agreed.
to come along with your board.
So yeah, not the best of the Mortal Kombat series, but I believe it's the rest of them used digitized actors, and this one uses 3D graphics. But you know, I don't hate it. I just would rather play the others. Yeah.
Yep.
I absolutely love these. I love the attention to detail, but it's not just that. Even if you didn't have the Mortal Kombat logos etched in, I just love the fact that, I was able to throw these in a duffel bag, surrounded by
Yep.
bubble wrap, of course. I'm not going to just throw these in, but, I took these across the city to an event and back, and everything's fine. Other than the MK2 chips, which any time unless you mount an arcade board to a wall and never touch it again for the rest of your life, you're going to run into issues like that. So
Yep.
I think overall it was just really impressive that the durable. I didn't have to worry about scratching, and if I did end up scratching this plexi, I'm assuming you would offer some kind of plexi only
Yeah.
replacements for that. So
Yep.
now if people do scratch it up at an event or something, it's, now you have to unbolt 7 bolts and don't even touch the arcade board at all. You just pop the plexi off and back on. It's way
Yep.
easier than dealing with everything else.
So much easier. And it's I like that you said that too about the event, because I think that there are so many arcade board collectors out there that they just put their board on a shelf, and I pretty sure they never even touch them again. And I hope again that by having these cases, that it will have more people feel comfortable to bring it to an event, set it up, or heck, even just bring them out on a game night where you just have a couple friends over and play some original Mortal Kombat. I mean, and I've done that, and it really does just have a different effect, even with somebody who has, who's not in this hobby at all. When they see those boards and you say, "Oh, this is the original arcade board," it just is a whole different experience. They just think it's so cool.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So price and availability. I guess I'm putting up a post for this probably tomorrow or the day after. So I'm assuming availability is going to be almost immediate and they're built to order, right?
They are, as of right now, they are. But I think for a lot of the more popular ones, like this Mortal Kombat, if
Maybe not that Mortal Kombat, but like
maybe not that Mortal
UMK3.
Kombat, just for you. It's only for you.
Here, I'll put the better one in there in the background, just so
You
people.
and 3 other guys,
Yeah.
maybe me included.
Right here, hold on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, everybody's gonna want that one.
That one for
Yep.
ones like this, that you
Yeah.
probably are going to have a couple extras made.
Yes, we will have a couple extras made of that, and we'll just kind of have to see how it goes. And but we do plan on, for something like MK3, MK2, probably maybe MK1. I don't know how many people want MK1. Yeah, we're gonna have, stock up quite a bit. But especially as we go on, which again, I do want to make cases for some of the more rare boards, then yes, it's going to be made to order. Price is really difficult right now because the price of steel the price of any materials right now is just stupid.
Yeah.
But
And in fact, I would say before, to politely interrupt you, before you even get into price, I would just like to very politely remind everybody that the world's in a strange place now. So anything that you buy today is almost guaranteed to be a lot more expensive than it was last year, and probably more expensive than next year, through no fault of the seller or creator whatsoever. So I just wanted to politely remind everybody of that. It's August, 2021. So this is the worst time for materials in a long time.
yeah, it really is. It really is. But we're trying to make it, it's definitely going to be, it's more expensive than obviously if you go with a plexi version, which is probably going to run you $100 or something like that, a little less than that. And then there's some other ones that are kind of over-engineered, a lot of different materials into it, like $200. So we're trying to come in around that 150 mark for a lot of these boards. And so that's our plan for right now, is to be around that 150
That's
mark.
absolutely awesome. And I think that's a fair price. I think a lot of people, or not a lot, but I think some people might respectfully say that's too expensive for me, because I keep my boards, vertically in an anti-static bag. I don't need to display them, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's
absolutely not. Yeah.
But that's not an unfair price. I would actually think that's a very good price for something like this.
And that's the thing. I mean, we're never, I think for any of our future products too, we're never going to be the cheaper option. Because I'm always going to end up, maybe it's just my personality, I'm always going to end up wanting to have something that goes the extra mile, has those fine details, and is probably going to be more on the the more expensive side probably. But again, I'm aiming for the enthusiast for most of these products, and for somebody who's like, I want the best I can get for my MK3 or whatever it would be.
I honestly think there's room for both. I'm very happy to see that there are
Oh
people
yeah.
out there tackling both sides. I'm looking for the rest of my tools here. That's why I've been like frantically ducking and looking around here. I think I found. All right. So for people that want to place an order, there should be some fairly standard boards. Like once you get the CPS 1 and 2s out there, I actually really like the turtle shell of the CPS 2. But if yours is cracked and you want to replace it, they're going to be fairly similar to the point where you probably don't need to check anything before ordering it from you. An MV1B,
Hmm.
MV1C, there's already plenty
Yep.
of cases for those too, but just saying. But for odder arcade boards or for ones that there's going to be a little bit of a tolerance, what do you think is the best way for people to check before sending it to you? Is some cheap tape measure like this that's like something you would
Yeah,
use for clothing? Is this going to be good enough with you knowing that these aren't perfect?
I would say so. That or a ruler, I think would be fine. Yeah,
Okay, but you
yeah,
wouldn't need calipers then for
yeah.
something like
Caliper.
that.
I mean, obviously that's great, and that's probably something that we would want in the future. If you said, "Hey, I have a really rare R-type Leo" or something like that, can you make a board for that? And I don't have that board, but I'd love to make a case for it. Then in that case, yeah, if you're not going to send it to us or anything like that, we'd probably need measurements from a caliper, to get it as close as possible. Because we actually measure all of our boards on a digitizer, which is where you can put a board onto a table and then you can mark all the different points, and it's to a really fine degree of measurement, and then it draws it up on the computer. But yeah, if it's a new board, we'll probably need caliper measurements. But just to check it against what we are currently using, I think a ruler or anything like that would be just fine.
Okay, because the way your standoffs work, if something's off by 3 millimeters, it doesn't matter at all.
That's
It's yeah,
fine.
it's
Yeah, if you're within a couple millimeters, it has some room, and then once you lock it in, it's not going anywhere. And that's another thing. A lot of other of the manufacturers, they would use just the standoffs that you would find on like the Mister, like the metal ones, right? But they're not very thick, and that would drive me nuts because they would basically just be, you know, touching the edge of whatever the hole cutout is, and it would make it bow, and it just felt really weird. The standoffs that we have are pretty thick, so it gives a lot of room.
yeah, that's something that I probably should have taken the top off of one of these. Actually, you know what? I mean, we're here. Why not, right? Let me
Yep. Why
hold on
not?
1 second. You just touched upon a problem I had when I bought one of those quote unquote premium um uh options before, in that the standoff kind of fell through the plexi, and
Yeah.
it was very frustrating to see after spending a lot of money on something like that. Uh, and this is absolutely correct solution. Thicker standoff with the smaller thread. That way you
Mhm.
could if the hole is off by a little bit, that's fine. You still have enough pressure. Because I remember the metal standoffs just went right through the main plexi. Now that was also for a wolf board, so I guess
But the wolf boards are a good example because really now at this point we're just gonna design logos for Rampage, Hang Time. I can't remember. There's some other popular one. Oh, Open Ice. Uh, some other ones, but those measurements, if you have a wolf board, it should fit. Is my point, and that goes for several other different types of boards as well. But I know the wolf boards are pretty much completely universal.
okay. So lifting the plexi off here, and show it's two pieces, but I'm gonna pick them up together. This and it. All right, so um, here we go. You can see the thickness of these versus where the screws go. This allows for quite a bit of play on both the bottom and on the top. So if for whatever reason, the tolerances are off in the boards, you could kind of maneuver these around.
Yep.
Actually, this is the perfect one to show. I didn't even realize it. Lucky guess.
Yep.
So you can see down here, yeah, zoom in to make sure. So you can see how the screw right here is pretty much all the way over to the side, because I guess these, might be just a millimeter off between them, but that does not matter at all, because when these go
Nope.
on, it covers the entire thing. So,
Which is why, I mean, really, when you assemble these, you just kind of keep everything loose, right? And once you have everything on there, you can just tighten everything up, and it's rock solid. But that does allow for, again, that margin of error, and you won't notice a difference at all.
check her out. I'll zoom back in, check around there now. You cannot see the hole in the board at all. Standoff is thick
Mm.
enough to cover all of it, and it's completely solid. So, and same thing up here. There, the holes are big enough to allow for a little bit of play. Oh, you couldn't see that up there. Hold on. There we go. The holes up here are big enough to allow a little bit of play, but these plastic pieces more than cover the entire thing, so you don't have to worry about them pushing through. If you want to double check, just use basic measuring tapes and rulers and stuff. Although if you have a cheap caliper, they're always handy. I think I have those listed in my Amazon store. I bought a few over the years
Yeah,
that were within $5 of each other, and a few were
yeah,
junk, and the others were actually pretty solid for the money.
yeah. You don't have to get a digital one or anything like that. I mean, you can get a pretty cheap one, and that'll be just fine.
Awesome. So now you said price availability for the MKs should be pretty much right away because these are already
Yep,
designed. Do you
yep.
have any others that are going to be available launch day?
No, nothing. It's just going to be the MK 1, 2, 3, 4. But very soon after, I'd say probably a week, plan to have some of the Konami games out. And I think after that, I'm really hoping to get some good feedback from the community and saying we want Neo Geo or we want Titan STV or whatever it is. Or I mean, I definitely want to do the CPS, CPS1, CPS2, because that's another thing that some of the really extravagant cases for the CPS2, like I have that huge beast one from Jason Customs back when he made that. And I really like that. It's really well built, but there's something about not being able to see the boards, not being able to see the old tech that kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to do that. So the Dark Soft kit for the CPS2. I mean, and some of the other ones that I think are cool. It's not as popular, but like the System 16 multi, the IRA multi. I definitely want to do those as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to make these. I think myself, everybody in the chat that's been joining us has all agreed that there are groups of people out there that just want a very high quality solution for arcade. Respectfully, not everybody, and that's totally cool. If
Yep.
you are on a budget, you
Yep.
can get some anti-static bags, some anti-static foam and boxes. You could store this stuff
Uh-huh.
vertically, and you're totally good to go. And there's no disrespect to that. That is completely and totally fine. But if you are somebody that wants to go the extra mile and have something that looks cool and is functional, I really like these a lot. These are pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much for making
Yeah.
these. I'll have more info on a bunch more of your boards in the future. At the very least, I'll be doing social media posts and written posts as they become available. I have a few more boards that I'm definitely going to be buying cases from you, so I'll be able to be
Mhm.
updated in that. And just keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. I love doing this. Love talking to people.
My pleasure.